Hi there, welcome back to the Curious Coconut podcast. Today, we're talking to Ren Huang, who is the founder of Guaji. Guaji is a Thai-based startup that is building foundational AI models for the Thai language. Now, if you're like me and don't know what foundational models are, don't worry. Today, we'll cover what they are, how you can build them, and some challenges you might face along the way. Today is also a very special day as we just recorded our 10th episode. So if you have been enjoying listening to our episodes so far, make sure to continue to do so. Support us by liking, sharing, and commenting on our posts, and that will really mean a lot. But without further ado, here's the episode for today.
Hey guys, welcome to the Curious Coconut. I'm here joined with my co-host Aadi, and also here with a very special guest, Ren, whom I've met at the startup event in Bangkok just a few weeks ago. Ren and we just had a brief conversation actually regarding what we do. And after listening to Ren's story, I thought he was interesting to have on the podcast. And yeah, Ren, why don't you tell us about yourself?
Hi, thanks for having me, guys. So my name is Ren. I am running a company called Goaji.ai. We're a speech recognition startup based in Bangkok, Thailand, mainly focusing on building foundational model for the country and also eventually for the region as well.
So what got you started with Goaji? Could you tell us about that?
Yeah. So I think like the company actually only started around a year ago. And the main idea is I think the problem that was facing right now we call it Southeast Asian, most of the Southeast Asian languages, low resource languages, right? So what that means is, generally speaking, for higher resources language like English, Chinese, Spanish, or countries with lots of people with that spoken languages, you have a lot of data, right? Available online, offline, in various places. You also have a lot of people working on them, right? So what that means is for most of those different languages, the accuracy and also the performance of different type of AI system is actually much better, right? So one quick example is, let's say Siri, right? It works actually very well for English, or even ChatGPT works very well for English. But when you apply it to low resources language like Thai, for example, suddenly it becomes like, not so good, right? And we saw that problem and we thought, okay, that's going to hinder a lot of the progresses that we can make as a country in the AI, and we're going to be behind to a lot of other different countries. So we thought like, okay, we need to have some, focused effort on trying to bring up the performance and the focus of the low resources language. Especially, I was born and raised here, right? So I want to make sure that we also are not severely behind our other neighboring countries, or even like the States, UK, all around the world. So that's basically the idea that what we're trying to do. So our focus generally is we wanted to build the foundation for the country to have some what I call a foundational model to help other developers or other application builders to build on top of, right? So essentially, what that means is we want to build a foundational base so that other people can take our API and build other applications.
I think, yeah, I get the basic idea. So basically, you build a foundational model for the language, and then other people can use that model to essentially train other applications like AI or call center type of things. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's very precise, yes.
Okay. So I'm just curious, how do you go about collecting these, like, because I'm assuming you have to collect like the voice recordings of people, right? So how do you go about doing that?
So I think we use a combination of many different things. One is publicly available data, both collecting from public sources like YouTube, et cetera, and also there's some open public domain data available as well, although not so much. So those are our two main sources. But our third source is actually very interesting because we realize that's because of the low resources language, the restriction, the amount of available data outside is very different than English or Chinese in general. So you need some like extra technique in order to generate more data compared to other places, right? So what we've been experimenting so far is we tried to create like a text-to-speech model, which essentially is like voice generation model, and try like tweak the model to make sure that, okay, you can generate like unlimited amount of data based on that kind of model. So it doesn't work if the original data is very, small. So if you started with zero data and you use generative model as training data, it doesn't work so well. But if you have like a strong, starting point model, and then you use generative voice to basically as an additional data to train a model, it works much better.
That's very interesting. So yeah, you like use text to basically generate like the more data for training purposes, right?
Yeah, yeah, and you can like in theory, you can generate like a limited amount of data based on that as well.
Hmm.
Yeah, but you need to start from, it's like a solid base model first.
Yeah,
Cool, cool,
that's
cool.
really interesting. I've never never really thought that you could go about this this way. But yeah, that's great to hear. Is there anything that was specifically hard about going about the Thai language that you can think of?
Yeah, yeah. I think Thai language generally is a very difficult language. So I think like language wise, there's in the NLP slash like speech recognition world, there's like levels towards languages, right? So like
Yeah.
the difficulty levels basically. Like English is like number one, like level one is like the most simple, is very easy, lots of data, also the language and also grammar structure is very easy. Chinese is like the third, right? Because it's a little bit harder because like one word can have multiple meanings, but in English also the same, but the combinations and everything, it's just tiny bit harder, right? There's also more, I guess, like individual words with different sounds. Like you have the same sound, but like there's like 10 different words. So slightly harder. But I think Thai is actually the hardest, right? And the main reason for that is because number one, there's no spaces between the words.
Yeah.
So like tokenization is difficult and inconsistent, right? So that's number one. Like when you have like different ways of splitting words, you have different tokens, and that means it's just much harder to have the model to learn because you have to learn all the different kind of ways that a word can be represented. Number two, the number of characters is also very difficult, right? You have like, the sala u, the my egg, the my hanagat. You're probably a little bit confused, Adi, but
It's all
but
good.
it's the way
Accents.
that the language is actually structured is very different. And I think number three is the grammar, right? The grammar is a little bit inconsistent as well. So combining all these three things, and also like there's no space as well. I talked about that, but combining all these three things makes the language, extremely hard to basically like handle compared to, let's say, the English or Chinese counterpart.
Hmm. So yeah, I think yeah, that makes sense because if there's no spaces, essentially is what I'm getting. It's much harder to break it down and to understand words and convert from voice to like text, right? So that the
Yeah.
computer can understand it.
Mm.
What I'm wondering is like, can you explain a bit of the process? Like, let's say you get a recording of someone speaking in Thai. How would you then like break it down and convert it into text? Like, what's the process like to do that?
Right. So in terms of like training data, what we wanted to start with is audio and text pair, right? So there's like let's say a snippet of audio, like 5 seconds audio, and you have like one or two sentences of words. You want to match those two things. And then what the model is trying to do is they're trying to basically like learn from these example data, the way that we speak, versus the way that are written, right? And they try to match that, and then slowly from, let's say, like trying to pronounce it, slowly building from the way that you pronounce words towards like, the whole sentences, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think it goes from a very low level to a very high level. I think an easier example to kind of like an analogy is it's a similar technique because it's all deep learning, but you can see it from, let's say, a computer vision way of things, right? In computer vision, basically, if you want to distinguish between dog and cat, what you do is you give them, you give the AI lots of examples, and then it'll try to distinguish between the sort of like the minor differences, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
there's like, similar things like, all dogs and cats have tails, have eyes, have ears, but different shapes,
Yeah.
right? Different types of, locations of where the mouth is. So the model is essentially trying to distinguish between those things, like the minor details.
Okay. Okay. That makes sense. And like I know as a computer science student that it's sometimes hard to remove bad data, right? So how do you go about doing that? Like, because I'm sure that sometimes there would be background noise in the audio, or like just the words aren't clear. So how do you remove that data, and what's that process like?
Yeah, I think data processing is definitely one of the, I guess it's more like an art than a science. Um,
Yeah.
because I think like the nature of data, especially in the wild, when you're doing like open domain stuff where, the source data can come from everywhere, you can't really control the environment, right? And also the way of speaking. Number one, noise is very difficult. Like, do you have like I think like there are easy noise and also difficult noise. Easy
Hmm.
noise is things like white noise or air conditioning or construction at the back where you can use standard libraries to process them to pre-process them to some extent. So that's easier. The harder one is actually like when you're in like a party or in a public places where there's actually spoken languages at the back of you, right?
Mm.
I think human in like we have like built-in capabilities of detecting where the voice sources come from, but we also have help from like eyes and also the direction people is talking, et cetera, to identify where the voice come from. So you're talking to you or talking to you.
Yeah.
But I think AI, if you're taking out those information, it's basically just become like the same thing, right? It all blends in. So you have
Hmm.
two people talking even next to each other. The microphone will probably pick both up. How do you distinguish between them? I think that's the most difficult thing. And generally, we just, just to answer your question, usually we just throw those data away because it's not really very useful.
You said that you've just recently started Gawaji. Is that right? Like a year ago, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, about a year ago, yeah.
How's the founding journey like between you and your teammates? Is it is it like a big operation right now, or what is it like?
I think the founding story is a little bit different than the standard company founding story because I actually know both of my co-founders before this company.
Right.
So one of my co-founder is actually Professor Egapol. He's actually an advisor for my first company, right? Like a technical advisor for my first
Right.
company.
Okay.
That was back in 2017. So he helped us with because I was building a computer vision startup back then, and so I developed a long-term relationship with him.
Mhm.
And essentially, and then my second co-founder is actually one of my co-founder from my second company.
Okay.
So I'm basically like bringing the old people from my journey to build this new company. But essentially, it started with the professor having a problem where he understands that there's a lot of needs in the corporate world
Mhm.
that foundational model are actually very very bad and they're struggling to build any applications based on that. And he was like, okay, now you're done with your second company. Do you want to start something together in the third company? I
Yeah,
was
that's
like,
nice.
oh, let me think about it for 2 months, right? So I traveled a little bit, did some research, trying to understand the problem a little bit more because obviously I have computer vision background, but I don't have
Yeah.
speech recognition background. So I'm trying to understand the space a little bit more, where the problem actually lies, and is there actually natural moats that can protect the company long term? And the answer turns out to be yes. And I thought this is a very good opportunity, and I have a chance to work with some of the people that I really really respect. So yeah, so we started a company together around like April last year. So
Wow.
about a year now.
Yeah, about a year
Mm.
now. Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
So you started off doing this in Thai language. Do you support any other Southeast Asian languages right now? As
Not
of
at the moment. So our
Okay,
plan is actually like I think we don't want to grow too fast.
right.
Because our approach is like we have investor asking this too, right? Why
Yeah.
don't you just go Southeast Asian? But our approach is like we want to make sure that we can build enough value, or in more like a business term, monopolize a country first
Yeah.
before we go out, right? Because I think there's still like you build the foundational model, but there's also the ecosystem and the applications that you have to build around these
Mm.
foundational model in order to make it work business wide, right? Because like a lot of the times API is not enough. You actually need more application on top of the API to help people solve the problems and also like infrastructures and tools around it.
Mm.
So our plan is to actually like build the foundational of the company on these first before we actually grow up, right? Because by the time that we have all these foundational pieces, when we grow to other countries, it'll be much, much faster and easier, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's important to be successful in like one market first before you start expanding. Or else you might just, you know, dilute your resources and then not have enough time to work on anything properly. It's really
For
likely you're
sure.
doing that. Um,
Yeah.
I'm just curious, a lot of times startups, they start off they start off, following one idea and then later on realize how to change something. So would you say your idea was always from the very start the same, to what you're doing now?
I think my vision has always been the same, even from the first company,
Mm-hmm.
which is like I want to enable like real applications for the AI space, right? And what that means is a little bit strange because, well, I have to explain that a little bit. I think there's a lot of like hype right now, especially with the recent ChatGPT and everyone investing lots of money in Nvidia things, the AI pin, everything.
Yeah.
Everyone's very hyped about AI right now, but a lot of them are still like at the peak of the hype cycle, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what that means is like people have very inflated expectation. Everyone was thinking, okay, this is like, oh, it's gonna be insane, it's gonna change the world, it's gonna replace everything. I think eventually that's going to happen, but it's not going to just jump from like where we are right now to that expectation, right?
Yeah.
So what's the most immediate, first thing that you have to do before you reach there, right? What's the first step? What's the second step? And my sort of like my unique position is because I understand the technology so well, I know the limitations of what's capable and what's not capable, what's possible, what's not possible. I'm able to identify what's the low hanging fruits that actually can bring a lot of impacts towards people and also towards business
Yeah.
as quickly as we can, like the basically like the steps towards that ultimate goal, right? So that's always been my focus on how do you build realistic applications that I can solve the problem today instead of like in 10 years.
Hmm.
Mm. You mentioned just now that everyone's expectations of AI is quite high. So I'm assuming that there's also a lot of people that want to invest in Gawaji. Do you filter out these investors in terms of what they can deliver as well?
Yeah. I think we're trying to, in terms of investor, I treat them a little bit like kind of like a partners, right?
Yeah.
Because I was hoping at least that they're going to be in it for a long haul. So I think it's very important for investor to have the right mindset and also the right way of thinking about how to approach these things.
Mhm.
We don't want people that are just in it because it's the hype right now. We want people who actually understands what we're trying to build our goal long term, because it's not going to be like a 2 or 3 year journey. It's probably going to be 5, 10, 15, even if we're lucky, that kind of journey. So we want people that actually understand the potential, and also have the background to like not question every decision that we make
Mm.
together along the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm.
Talking about investors, what would you say is your business model? Because I don't think I fully understand how you guys plan to make money.
So I think we have different layers. Because we started with the foundational models.
Mm-hmm.
Most of our business is kind of like an API base, right? So you connect to our API, you can use our API to either transcribe text, so converting conversation to text, and
Yeah.
then you can build your own application based on that,
Mm-hmm.
or use our API to generate speech, right? You can type in some word, we'll generate some speech for you, right? And you
Okay.
can also use that to build applications. So that's one of our business model, just basically API. Over time, we realized that there's also a lot of needs that comes from businesses that doesn't have their own development team. So we started to build our own application on top of our, API as well.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the first product that we built is a meeting assistant for online meetings like this one, right? So it's if you guys use Fireflies before, we're basically building Fireflies for Thailand, eventually Southeast Asia, but
What's
now.
Fireflies? I'm not sure what that is.
Oh, have you used Otter AI before? Otter
No.
Fire Drain? No,
Not
okay.
yet.
Not familiar with that,
It's
no.
essentially it's a it's like an assistant that sits in your call. So there will be like a person sit in your calls that takes notes of all the conversation in the calls. And after the call,
Oh.
it will summarize the whole calls to you, like, the high level summaries, the, different talking points and details, and also like action points for each people.
Hmm.
Right. And then it will send that to all the participants. So it's kind of like your secretary basically for your
Yeah.
meeting.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
that's
so
interesting.
that's
I didn't know about this.
yeah.
Mhm.
They actually have lots of users, like Fireflies. I think they have like 10 million users or something, but
Okay.
probably
Wow.
the States. Yeah,
I mean, yeah, it makes sense. So you're basically building that, but for like people who are having discussions in Thai, right?
basically, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So that's our first product, and our plan is to build more and more products out of
Mm-hmm.
our basically stack, and hopefully the time to market for each product will actually decreases over time because of all the basically ingredients, or also the building pieces that we put around in each of the products.
I just have like a random question, right? So I know like there's different like voice assistants, or I don't know if voice assistants is right, but like text to speech software that are present for English, right? So if you highlight some text, it can read that out to you. Does that kind of thing not exist for Thai languages?
They actually do. But the difference between that and us is, well, I was talk about the problem first, right? The problem for those existing software is they're not very good language because
Okay, yeah.
because they're focusing on English, right? And
Mm-hmm.
basically other languages are just afterthought.
Hmm.
So generally speaking, they just make it available just so that it's there. But usually most of the time it's not so good, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think one of the major cloud providers, I don't want to name names, but they're basically like their performance is like 80%, which means like every 5 words, there's one word's wrong. So
Oh,
that's
that's not
not
good.
really usable.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think like there's still a huge space that, a huge gap that needs to be addressed in this space for sure.
Okay.
Mm.
Okay, makes sense.
I'm sorry, my question is sort of like I'm coming to be some sort of investor a little bit. I don't want to give you that impression, but do you have any competitors in this space by any chance?
But yeah, we're happy to talk about it too. I mean, like we have competitors for sure.
Yeah.
I think like generally speaking, the big tech, right? The open AIs of the world, the big tech, they all have their own speech to text API. Some of them have text voice generation.
Yeah.
But I think like I said, most of them are focusing in English right now because it makes total sense, right? It's the biggest market in the
Hmm.
world. So I think that leaves us a lot of spaces for Thailand and also other Southeast Asian languages to have their own local ones. We see examples in China. There's also like Chinese specific companies that does really well. I think there's like at least 3 unicorns in China that does speech recognition.
Okay. Wow.
Okay.
So it's a pretty big space. So I suspect there's probably going to be a few players for Southeast Asian focus languages as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Nice, nice. I just wanna like ask, like, what's the biggest challenge would you say you have faced so far? Like this could be related to your team or just anything in the startup world, and how have you overcome it, or how do you plan to overcome it?
I think like generally speaking, AI talents are really hard to find in Southeast Asia.
Hmm.
Um, because like I think most of the people who can build these kind of like foundational models, these research scientists, if they're like have good level of English, they'll be at like Google, Facebook, all the research people in the world, right? And
Hmm.
making like insane salaries, right?
Yeah.
So I think that makes a lot of the talent really hard to find in Thailand.
Okay.
What we're trying to do is we're trying to sort of like build our own talents, right? I think the talent pool is there because we know that the top university in Thailand, there's a lot of like extremely smart people in the industries. And also many of them beings are one of our co-founders, Professor Ekapol's students that we have direct access to. So I think many of them, go to do master degree or PhD in the States and various places. But
Mm-hmm.
many of them also choose to stay. So we sort of like talk to the people that wanted to stay locally and try to build it, these talents off of these people so that we can, grow together as a company as well. So that's how we find talents and retain talents, or our plan at least for the long term. But I think like that can easily be one of the biggest challenges for Southeast Asia as a whole, because of the amount of capital available compared to the U.S. or Chinese counterpart.
Just to expand on Adi's question, because he talked about the challenges, what do you think are the biggest achievements that you guys have gotten so far?
Um, I think like the ability to build these kind of models is definitely one of our, big wins. Because our model, like we spend a lot of time on it, and we've also benchmarked our models in terms of both the accuracy and also the efficiency of the model. And I think generally speaking in AI, it's really hard to achieve both. Because if you have like a example would be if you have like a very big complex model, it's going to be super accurate, right? Because you have lots of parameters, maybe billions of parameters. But the downside is, okay, you're going to have a big model. It's going to be very expensive to run or to train. And it doesn't really make sense in most cases when you're trying to automate a lot of things, but the cost of automating is actually more expensive than the thing that you wanted to automate.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And also, and then on the flip side, if you have like a very small efficient model, it's not going to be very accurate because the number of complexity is very low, right? So you get a very fast model, very efficient model, but it's not really usable because the accuracy is so low. So I think like it's actually like a big win for us to being able to achieve the best of both world of being a hyper efficient and also cost effective model, but also achieve very, very good accuracy. So I think that's definitely one of like probably our most significant achievement so far because it allows and enables lots of different applications to be built. So you're not worried about the resources anymore, right? Because like our model can actually run on CPU instead of like a traditional AI model that has to run on GPU, which is like super expensive.
Yeah. Accuracy wise, just out of curiosity, where are you guys standing compared to your competitors right now in the Thai
So
market?
I think for Thai depends on the applications and also the environment that we're trying to do. But generally speaking, 90 to 95%.
That's pretty good. So,
Hmm.
That's pretty good. Yeah. And we can also like do like this is a little bit more details, but we
Yeah.
also have capabilities of fine-tuning the model to make it even more specifics, right? For instance, like if you're in, let's say, insurance industry, you probably have a lot of like insurance related jargons, or company names, product names, that we can actually like, use in a very short amount of time, fine-tune the model to fit those needs as well.
Mhm.
that's great. What would you say is like your vision with this company and where you want to take it?
I think like our biggest goal is we want to build the basis and the basically like, the picks and the shovels for all the different AI applications happening in Thailand and eventually Southeast Asia, right?
Hmm.
So I think long-term wise, yes, we're building a lot of the application ourselves, but we also want to build like a community of developers who build out of us, right? And to build different kind of capabilities using their creativities,
Hmm.
to build different applications for different industries. So I think like long-term wise, I think if we can make that happen, it will make, I think the overall efficiency of, people in the country increases significantly, right? And so that we don't fall behind significantly towards, our, neighboring countries.
Yeah, yeah. What I want to know is that you mentioned that you had previous startup before this as well, right? So I just want to know what got you started in this like entrepreneurial journey, and what was the thing that inspired you to become an entrepreneur and start your first startup?
I think like in terms of like entrepreneurship spirits, I think I got it from probably my parents, because my parents are both like entrepreneurs.
Oh, cool.
So I knew that growing up, I generally want to be like them. I want to create something of my own. So I think that's probably is the initial sparks. And then I think like many different people my age, during maybe like high school or university, I don't remember exact time, but we all watched the movie Social Network, right?
right?
Oh, yeah. I know that one.
And then you sort
Of
of
course.
like being inspired a little bit based on that, and in a good and bad way. But and then you heard lots of these like Silicon Valley stories and everything, and you can think, oh, okay, you can actually achieve so much at a young age, contributed so much, and you get all these dreams. But ultimately, I knew from the start that if I want to build a company, I need to have some specific skills, right, that are a little bit different than other people. And I think I was very lucky because like during my time in university, I studied my engineering degree at Oxford. We have a very strong AI teacher that actually are pretty famous in computer vision. And I was lucky enough to take his class and got really into computer vision and machine learning in general. Got really addicted of the potential that it can be done. So I sort of like got into the rabbit hole and decided that AI is going to be what I want to build long term and try to acquire skills from there.
And you were doing this like way before ChatGPT launched, right? So you're not just like one of those people who just got the
Before it
hype.
was cool.
Yeah, I mean, it was like 2015. It
Yeah.
was cool back then too.
Okay.
But mostly in the academic
Yeah.
Mm,
society. But it was cool back then too. Not as mainstream as now, but yeah.
Yeah. No, definitely. And
yeah.
what I don't know, like where do you see AI going in the future? Because there's always things like,
Mhm.
oh, AI is going to replace jobs. And it kind of has been at some points. Um, so like I guess you must be like more positive, but what's your kind of take on it?
Well, I think it's overall, I think like the automation technologies like AI, it's going to be similar to a lot of like what other things that actually came before, right? Like whether it's like factories, machines, things that actually ease your life. I think
Hmm.
generally speaking, AI is not gonna directly replace job because I think a person's responsibility is gonna be much more than individual task, and I think AI is gonna replace a lot of individual tasks. So I think it's gonna help us increase our productivity, like individually as human person,
Hmm.
significantly, right? So instead of let's say 1 month you can do like 1 month of work, or maybe you can build like 3 presentations, and suddenly now you can build like 30 presentations,
Yeah.
right? So increase the efficiency significantly. So I think people are gonna able to get more done in less time, right? And generally speaking, if you're a business owner, you probably know that if you can grow faster, you can get more done in less time. You generally want to grow more. You don't fire your people, you hire more people and then you grow faster, right?
Hmm.
It's not like, okay, I don't need this human anymore. You sort of like redirect the person to a new job to make sure that your company actually grow faster. So I think increasing efficiency ultimately will help boost a lot of the economics activities around the world.
Yeah.
Going back to entrepreneurship, when you start your ventures, right, how do you approach risk taking and failures? And how do you take those into consideration before you start something new?
I think about risk this way, right? So I generally speaking, I make decision based on like basic decision theory, which is like potential outcome times the probability of success. And then different people, different person will have different level of risk tolerant. So like basically that affects the filter of the percentage of successful rate that you can take. If you're a highly risk tolerable person, then the percentage can be very, very low, maybe like
Mhm.
less than 1%. But if the payout is very high and the EV is very high, then you probably decided that, right? And for me, I think generally speaking, I'm not as an entrepreneur, I'm not a very, high risk taker. So
Right.
my like the probability of success for me has to be at a certain amount of level for me to say, okay, this is because I'm not a person who will say, okay, 1% of being I don't know, like $100 billion company. That's not something I want to do, right? I want to have at least like 25%, 30% of success rate before I actually go in.
Mhm.
So my
Hmm.
approach has always been like, how do you de-risk? How do you understand the risk better? How do you make sure that what you build next have higher probability of success, right? So
Mhm.
I think like get those answer, um, understanding those factors before you jump in. will help me ease my mind quite a lot.
Okay.
Yeah. And as an entrepreneur, I know that you have lots of things you need to do in a particular amount of time. Do you have any specific strategies that you use, to manage your time and prioritize things that have more importance?
Um, I think like we all have tendencies of trying to do a lot of things, trying to multitask, trying to get a lot of things done, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think over time I realized that there are some tasks that are more important than others. There are some tasks that if you get that done and get it done right, it will have significantly more impact than 10 other things that are on your list.
Mm-hmm.
So I think like being able to identify that task, identify that direction, or, as a very commonly abused term, prioritize,
Hmm.
um, is the utmost important.
Yeah. So being able to like figure out what task is important and what task will give you the most value.
Basically, yeah, yeah. And also like I think delegate also helps a lot.
Yeah.
Lots of like, highly abused words.
Yeah, I guess you need to,
But it's true. It's
yeah,
true though. It's true.
you need to be able to know how to do those things in a startup environment, right? Um,
Yeah.
because you can't do everything yourself, so you need to be able to prioritize the things you need to do. And if you can't do them, and it's still important, you need to be able to tell others to do it. So I think it might seem trivial, but I think we just overlook some simple things often.
Yeah, and I think like generally speaking, entrepreneurs are creative people, right? And
Yeah,
we all have like lots of ideas all the time that potentially can distract us.
yeah.
Trying to refocus is also it's a very, very difficult task for sure.
Yeah, like how do you manage to do that? Because just me personally, I have like lots of ideas that I want to work on at any given point in time, but I'm only one person. So how do you like refocus? Do you have any like tips that you can give us?
I think like you first want to, it's kind of like company building, right? You want to align a goal first of everyone in the company that this is where you want to get to in the
Mm-hmm.
next 5 years, like long-term wise. So that sort of like helps with all the decision making within the company, right? So you have like North Star, and then you have the culture, which is the culture essentially is just how you make decision internal, right? So once you have those two things done, it may come much easier, right? So if you're clear that in 5 years or in 10 years you want to get there, and you know that this type of process or this type of culture will help you get there. Once those two are in place, it makes making decision much more automated,
Hmm.
if that makes
Okay.
sense.
Yeah,
Right.
it does. On this topic though, what does Gawaji sort of prioritize um in terms of culture, the culture that you want to build and the sort of people that you'd like to have on board?
Well, I think like our North Star essentially is we want the best foundational model that allows the more and more people that can be used to build different applications, right? So that's actually, I think, very clear from day one. But I think like in terms of culture, we don't really have like very strong we're still a very small team, so our culture essentially is just defined by the team members within. But
Sure.
most of our sort of like our approach is we want to be pragmatic, we want to be practical,
Mhm.
and we want to identify low hanging fruits, right? Because we believe that there's a lot of things that can be done with lower effort but higher impact. So that's essentially how we make decision. How do we make sure or achieve certain things with minimal effort, but can potentially achieve higher impacts, right? Things like building your products, for instance. If you're choosing between building let's say like for our Go meeting bot, instead of using your own time, spend 3 months building like a meeting bot, is there like a third party services that we can use, right? Is there an open
Hmm.
source that we can use, right? That's an easy example. Or let's say growing company, growing user base, like do you go door to door Do you do like LinkedIn mass messaging, or is there like a more efficient way of trying to achieve that thing? Right.
Mm.
Same thing for our products too, right? Like how do we decide the next product? We decide then on, you know, what's the maximum number of people that can use this, the impact, and also the time that it takes to build it, right? We don't want to be building products that take 2 years that can only help like 3 potential users, right? So that's generally how
Yeah.
we make decisions.
No, that's cool. I think we should head towards the closing section of the podcast now. Um, but Ren, as like I know a lot of young people want to be entrepreneurs. Do you have any advice for young people to help them off in their entrepreneurial journey?
I think like generally speaking, there's more and more resources out there that are helping young founders.
Mm-hmm.
I think in the States, definitely there's like, the YCs of the world, the PG program of the world, lots of different resources. But I think if you're founders in Southeast Asian region or low resources language region, a lot of time you need to sort of like twist a lot of the learnings a little bit to match your market, right? So I think the generally speaking, you have to sort of like understand your market a little bit and don't be afraid to change a lot of the assumptions or the thesis to make your company works.
Hmm. Some another
That's too
another
vague,
thing.
dude.
Yeah, no, but it's good advice. Some people they don't know like the basics of of what you've just mentioned, and yeah, it's good. It's good information.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's an example, right? For instance, like if you're building, let's say, English-based or like a global-based product, or even like a Chinese-based product, it's very easy to scale from, let's say, one state to another state, right? You scale. It's basically essentially like similar culture, similar go-to-market from LA to San Francisco to New York, whatever,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
or to Beijing to Shanghai. But I think if you're growing like a local company and you want to go region wise, it's probably not safe to assume that the go to market or the language or the nature of the business for I don't know like Ho Chi Minh City and Bangkok and and Malaysia or Singapore is the same, right?
Mm.
So I think like we're gonna definitely run into those things. So you have to take those things into account on how do you go about growing your company.
Yeah,
Mm.
no, I think that's a good point actually, because each of those, like even though those cities and countries are in the same region, they might have very different cultures and languages, and things that they like to do. So what one thing might work in one country may not be the same in another place, right? So I guess going in when you're trying to expand, it's really important to kind of do your research for that particular market and make sure you understand that market before fully committing to it.
Yeah, 100%.
So yeah, that's a good point.
One thing we like to ask our guests, sorry, is what is it that excites you about the future? Is there anything that stands out to you, Ren?
I'm probably one of those like a little bit more uh, overly optimistic person, but I think like potential AI can still be hugely explored. And I
Mm,
think like because there's so many tasks that can be automated by I think I'm very excited to see what kind of like new opportunities, new platform, new types of jobs that's going to be created over time that requires more human creativities that AI can't achieve, right?
mm.
So I'm
Right.
really looking forward to that, and I think I'm very lucky to hopefully can see that in my lifetime.
Is there any specific industry or like sector that you think AI could be like drastically change things?
Um, there's no specific like industry, I guess.
Or like
Not
which
really.
one are you most excited about? Like you mentioned, like the creative industry might be still run by humans.
Yeah, let's say like I don't know, it's just a generic thing.
Yeah,
Let's say, self-driving cars existed everywhere.
yeah.
You know, what are people going to spend doing on cars, right? Is there like a new opportunities? Because like, a lot of time you can, okay, definitely works on car, you can listen to different things, but is there like a new type of, I don't know, like an entertainment industry
System.
specifically for cars? If you don't have to do your home chores anymore, like how are you going to spend your time, right? Is there going to be more ways of, extracting creativities while you're not doing chores? Like is the entertainment industry going to boom so much, but then a lot of like AI is going to automate a lot of like the entertainment industry as well. You get a lot of like AI influencers now, which is like very interesting.
Yeah, that's just insane.
How it's gonna play out, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So I really want to know that.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting time to be alive. There's so much changes going on in the world. And yeah,
Every
just
day, well, it's insane.
yeah, people just use AI in so many different ways, and you never know, like, because the human brain is so creative, right? And
Yeah.
since we have this power to create whatever we want now, like, it's going to be interesting to see how people utilize that technology.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But as you said as well with AI influencers, like who would have expected that? Who
It's actually a very big use case, which is interesting.
yeah, for sure, for sure.
Like, yeah, I don't understand like how like I don't even know like why people would be inspired by someone who's AI or like choose to follow them. But I guess I don't know, it's just I guess someone's putting in the work, like someone's telling the influencer what to say, right? At the end of the day. So I guess that's just a better way of doing that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, it's lots of like interesting new businesses out of these things as well, right?
Yeah.
I've talked to one founder before. He was trying to build like a conversational bot that emulates the way that each influencer talks, so that
Hmm.
if you're like a influencer, you might have a clone of you that can talk to every single individual of your followers, talk similarly to you. Right? And
Yeah.
that would be a very interesting experience, right?
Yeah.
For instance, if you like a sort of like a health influencer is about bodybuilding, then maybe you can pick your influencer's brain on how should I go about to,
That's
do my own reps, how do I focus first, these kind of stuff, right?
that's really interesting that you brought that up. Because that's actually I'm not aware if you know the series Black Mirror.
Oh, Black
Uh,
Mirror, yeah, I know
yeah,
Black Mirror,
Black
yeah.
Mirror. There's an episode that is basically about that, what you just mentioned, where some celebrity put their, I guess, brain and soul, I guess, into this like device, which is like a small despot. And it's just, yeah, I just thought about it because
The one with the famous singer, right? I don't
yes,
remember
yes,
who.
yes.
Oh, doesn't the singer die in that one?
Oh, I don't know if she dies in that one. I haven't. I don't think I've watched it till the end. But yes,
No, I
yes.
think wait, is that the one where she dies and then they just use AI to recreate her and kind of
Oh, okay, okay. I think yeah. I think you're right. Yeah, it's the famous singer. I think it was like
I don't remember who it was, but
yeah,
yeah.
wait,
yeah.
it was Miley Cyrus, right? I think.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. It's probably Mary Cyrus, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't
I
remember.
think
It's been
so.
a while since I've seen that episode.
Really
But
dark
yeah.
though.
But
Really,
yeah,
really dark.
it's amazing how, how close we are to these like science fiction, right?
For sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Um yeah, anyway, speaking of fiction, um do you like reading books or like we at the Curious Coconut, I love reading books, both nonfiction and fiction. Do you have any good recommendations for us and our uh, viewers?
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm a nonfiction person. I think there's several things I can recommend. I think like life in general. This is probably like a big classics, right? Which is like How to Win Friends and Influence People. That's like,
Yep.
everyone have to read that book.
Yeah.
But I think for startup specifically, I think Hard Things About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz was really good. It details a lot of like the difficult things that you'll potentially face, and generally speaking, give you like the right expectation coming into founding companies.
Hmm.
So that you don't get too surprised and you understand that you're not the only one facing these kind of like difficult things. Yeah,
Okay.
I would say that'll be the book to read.
Hard things about hard things.
Gotta
Yeah, it's
secure
by
that.
Ben Horowitz. It's he's a famous VC actually.
Oh,
Anderson Horowitz, like A16Z, one of the founder there.
Okay.
Yeah, very successful guy.
Yeah, we'll have a look. Maybe it will be in my next to read list.
Yeah.
Um, all right, I guess this would be the end of the episode. Is there anything you would still like to share with our audience that could just be, your website or just like anything personal that you would like to share with our audience?
Yeah, I mean, if you are a Thai audience, we recently just, beta launch our new product, Go Meeting, which is a meeting assistant that I mentioned earlier in the episode, that basically help you summarizes and basically acts like your secretary, right, for your meetings. You can try it out for free. Just go to gomeeting.ai, and then yeah, just sign up.
sounds good.
Awesome.
Yeah, and we'll include like the links to your website and stuff in the description, so that people can easily access that.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All
Well,
right.
thank you, Ren, so much for coming on the podcast today. It was really lovely chatting with you. And yeah, good luck to you with your startup. Thank you
Yeah.
for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, guys. It's been a pleasure.